Okay, so we're going to continue practicing subtracting integers. It talks about a key concept that we're going to use today, and it's called additive inverse. And if you remember, we have mentioned this before as something called zero pairs. And previously, when we talked about zero pairs, we actually talked about physically adding counters, a positive and a negative, in order to add the counters that we needed to take away without adding any value to it. So we're going to do this problem first by going back to what we talked about with counters to start with. So if we have 6 and we want to subtract a positive 7, we only have 6 positives. So what do we need to do to create a total of 7 positives? Okay, that's correct. So if I only have 6 positives, in order to add another positive, I'm going to have to add a negative, and that is 1 zero pair. So we had to add 1 zero pair. Now that we have 7 positives, we can take it away, and what we are left with is what answer? So please answer the question, what is positive 6 minus positive 7? And that is correct, negative 1. All right, so now we're going to look at the number line real quickly. And we're going to notice we've done some similar things last week with this number line. So if we start with a positive 6 and I take away a positive 7, you can see I pass the 0 and I land on the negative 1. Last week, that situation was 6 plus negative 7. But today, we're seeing that's also equal to 6 minus positive 7. These are two equivalent expressions. And again, it comes back up here to additive inverse. So what it's saying to do as a rule, if you have a number and you want to subtract something, you can actually find the same answer by making it into an addition problem. So just like we had previously learned, we could divide fractions by multiplying by the reciprocals. We can subtract by adding the inverse. And reciprocals, remember, is the inverse of a fraction. And additive inverse is kind of a similar concept. You're flipping it around. These are the opposites. A positive 7 has an opposite of a negative 7. Okay, so if we have positive 6 minus positive 7, the equivalent expression would be positive 6 plus negative 7. Okay, so we're going to practice putting this concept into, into practice, really. So if we have a positive 8 and we want to take away a positive 13, we would have to add a bunch of zero pairs in order to get enough positives to take away. But we're not going to do that. I'll show you by checking it in a moment or by drawing that model, but let's just try practicing what they're asking us to do. So if I have the expression 8, let's try this again, 8 minus positive 13, that is equivalent to 8. The opposite of subtraction is addition, and I'm going to add the opposite of positive 13. I'm going to add a negative 13. Okay, so on a number line, and pretty soon you're going to get kind of used to doing this in your head, and you won't necessarily have to draw number lines, but for right now, I think it's a good idea for the concept to actually do this. So we're going to add a negative 13, and we know that negative 13 has a greater absolute value than 8, and so we are going to end up on the negative part of the number line. So our answer is going to be negative, but negative what? The absolute value of 8 is 8. So what do we do to create the number 13? 8 plus what number equals negative 13? Okay, so 8. I'm going to count up. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And so now I'm going to count how far past 0 I went. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those of us who have been practicing our subtraction facts would know that 13 minus 8 is 5, and since it's going to be negative, it's going to be negative 5. So that is our answer. So if we did the 0 pairs and we had 8 positives, okay, so if 8 positives, which want to take away 13 positives, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and if we added 5 positives to get to 13, we'd have to add 5 negatives, and so then when we take away all of the positives, taking away the positive 13, then that ends up with those negative counters. So now we've kind of proven by showing on the number line way and with the counter and 0 pair way that with those models that this does work. So we're going to just focus on what they've done here. So they said that negative 10 minus 7. So instead of making this a subtraction problem, they're going to turn it into an addition problem. Negative 10 plus negative 7 instead of, this is actually a positive 7. I'm going to put the parentheses here so you see that's a positive 7 that they're subtracting. But they're going to add a negative 7. So negative plus a negative is a what? Negative or positive? I want you to answer that question. If you have a negative and you add a negative, will it be negative or positive? Of course, the answer is negative. So negative 10 plus negative 7 is negative 17. Okay, so there were a couple other examples that they have at the top of this page you can go through on your own. But I want to jump to number 5 and number 6 because you can see the straight lines are back. What does it mean when you have something in between two straight lines? Do we remember what that means? I want you to type off to the side what you think that is. Okay, that's correct. It is absolute value. Okay, now some of you might have typed in IDK. Okay, that's fine. But it means absolute value. In fact, actually says right there, absolute value bars act like a grouping symbol. So you should be able to get this answer because it tells you right there. All right, so if we have 6 minus 10, what's the absolute value of that? So that's the same thing as 6 plus negative 10, which is a negative 4. Okay? So that's why they wrote a positive 4 here, because the absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. Then we have minus, so they have minus the absolute value of negative 8. So the absolute value of negative 8 is 8. So now that brings us to this equation, 4 plus negative 8. So if we have 4 minus positive 8, we can change that to an addition problem, and you're going to add the opposite, and the opposite of positive 8 is negative 8. So positive 4 plus negative 8, we learned when we added integers that the absolute value of the negative is greater, so the answer is going to be negative, and 8 minus 4 is 4, so the answer is negative 4. So let's do this. I have negative 4, I'm going to add that to the opposite of positive 1. So that should be negative 1. So negative 4 plus negative 1, this will be negative 5. And so what is the absolute value of negative 5? Okay, go ahead and write that in now. The answer is positive 5, but we had that negative outside here. Okay, so negative 5 minus the absolute value of negative 3. What's the absolute value of negative 3? 3. Okay, very good. So now we have negative 5 minus positive 3. So now I need to change that to the additive inverse. So negative 5 plus, and what is the opposite of positive 3? The answer is negative 3. And so negative 5 plus negative 3, the answer is negative 8.